talks. Face the Nation moderator and CBS News senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan is in Washington. So, Margaret, this is a really interesting development. No doubt it's a serious foreign policy coup for the president of the United States. But I also wonder on the other side what Kim Jong-un is expecting from this. We know that he has aspirations to sit at the table with the United States. It can show his people that the United States is perhaps afraid of the steps and the moves that he's made over the last couple of years. And I just wonder if we look back at the 1990s, we all remember the Sunshine policy, the Sunshine diplomacy between the South and the North went nowhere. The North Koreans reneged on the 1994 pledge to not build nuclear weapons. So what does the United States get out of this other than it looks great for the president right now?
Well, the White House insists that things will be different this time. They are not going to reward simply talking. They're keeping military exercises going. They're not taking sanctions off of North Korea, so that pressure continues. But what we are seeing here, the U.S. says no concessions are being made, but indeed going into a meeting where the leader of North Korea and the president of the United States are on, quote, equal footing, is in and of itself a bit of a risk and a bit of a reward for this dictator. And the question is, if these talks don't go well, then what's next? There's a lot of diplomatic groundwork that typically gets laid before this level of a presidential summit so that they can actually have something to agree on and not escalate accidentally where we are already in a tense situation.
Yeah, in fact, many people are wondering why the president didn't ask for something up front, like perhaps there's 3 Americans that are imprisoned in North Korea, perhaps accessing their freedom before agreeing to this meeting. But, it's very early days. What is the likelihood, do you think, of this meeting actually happening, and where would it take place?
Well, you are hearing the White House give itself some wiggle room already. They're not committing to that May deadline that the South Koreans laid out. In fact, saying time and place to be decided still. So the Secretary of State was asked about this today, and Rex Tillerson said it'll be some weeks before we see this kind of meeting. Now, he has said in the past that China is likely to play a role in these direct talks at some point. Does that mean on this particular offer that's the way it plays out, that the summit could take place in Beijing? There aren't a lot of places that Kim Jong-un can travel because of those sanctions and because he is such a pariah. And where is this appropriate? For the president of the United States to sit down with North Korea's leader. No encounter like this has taken place in 70 years. And in fact, no world leader has been willing to meet with Kim Jong-un because they don't want to put him on equal footing or give him the reward of international recognition. So there's a lot of questions. And the White House won't even say at this point who is leading all of this, who is going to have those first encounters to make sure that when the 2 leaders sit down, the conversation goes well and to iron this out.
Yeah, especially because the U.S. envoy to North Korea announced his retirement. I don't know if he'll still be there in May when this is scheduled to happen. But you mentioned Rex Tillerson, and I wanted to get your take on the fact that Rex Tillerson really almost around the same time as we were learning of this proposed meeting was saying, it's too early. We're still talking about talks to negotiate. Once again, they seem not to be on the same page, Rex Tillerson and what was happening inside the White House.
Look, anyone who tells you that yesterday was pre-planned is not telling you the truth. Anyone on the inside will tell you this is not how we expected to announce a meeting. The president had indicated he was willing to have a face-to-face encounter with Kim Jong-un at the right time. The idea that the national security advisor to the South Korean president would stand in front of the White House and make an announcement of the president of the United States' schedule is highly unusual. It's odd that H.R. McMaster, the president's national security advisor, said nothing yesterday. The Secretary of State had to then explain today why he said we are such a long way off from negotiations. And the way he nuanced that was to say there's a difference between talks and actual negotiations. So he's already lowering expectations to say a meeting, an encounter, doesn't mean that we believe North Korea is ready to negotiate away its nuclear program, and we're not going to reward them simply for talking. Diplomacy here is not cost-free. So they're given the reward of an encounter, but they're not giving more than that in their view. But as you say, there are 3 Americans sitting in North Korean labor camps right now. And it would be certainly a tremendous gesture to offer to release them. And we haven't heard the White House talk about them at all.
Indeed. And Margaret, let's just sort of talk practicality here. I mean, what are the chances, given that it appears to a lot of people who have been studying the region for many, many years, and the dynamic between the North and the South, the United States, Japan, China, and even Russia, that because it appears that the president is essentially saying what Anne-Marie said, look, Rex Tillerson in meeting with some Ethiopian officials seemed to be a distance away from where the president ended up last night, that the president thinks, look, I got sent to Washington because I am the one who can fix things. I don't need all of these swamp rats, right? But that's the same thing that Kim Jong-un thinks of his power in his country, and the chances of being snookered, of being taken in, just the fact that Kim Jong-un is going to be sitting at the table with President Trump, are our partners in South Korea, in Japan, and in China worried because we don't have all of these diplomats in place, these pre-talks, these talks at the lower levels that generally happen before 2 world leaders sit down to discuss a delicate situation that, frankly, regards our national security?
And that's why you have some of the Republican allies of the president and sometime critic Lindsey Graham of South Carolina coming out and saying, Kim Jong-un, don't walk into a meeting think you're going to play the president of the United States because it's not going to go well. Meaning, if this meeting doesn't go well, maybe this becomes the problem of the Pentagon, that it's not about diplomacy, that perhaps it escalates is the implication there. So certainly there's risk. And I know it sounds to people at home like a bunch of diplomatic gobbledygook to say this is the way things are supposed to happen through protocols, through lower level officials. But the reason that process is in place is so that you can sort of manage not only expectations, but manage risk. And President Trump and many of those around him have shown that they don't like process. They promise to shake things up here in Washington. The concern is that a lack of experience could be a detriment here rather than an asset, because Kim Jong-un doesn't have diplomatic experience. His dad and his grandfather certainly played past American officials. The concern is perhaps he knows that playbook and we'll revisit it this time, and that perhaps President Trump doesn't have enough diplomatic experience here to walk in and turn the page. White House officials say, look, our position is not going to change. He will deliver a hardline message, and we are going to be consistent on that. So if he walks into a room and simply says, I hold the cards, you got to give up your nukes, and we have nothing more to talk about, is there a risk? Some would say yes. Some would say this is a tremendous opportunity, and that the only person worth negotiating with in the first place is a dictator that runs North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Absolutely. And of course, the risk, of course, is that, let's say Kim Jong-un says, I'll give up my nukes, you remove troops from South Korea, and the president, because he likes making deals, says, okay. And that is the fear. Right.
I think that, you know, we've been talking about how loosey-goosey this seems to appear. I have to believe that something like that couldn't happen, that they're not just sort of meeting separately and throwing out that this will be well planned should it ever happen.
Okay.
Margaret Brennan, thanks.
We will see. The president does have a national security team. Some players on that might be changing. There's a lot of speculation around that. But we will see. The defense secretary and the secretary of state certainly have a lot to say about this.
Right. Margaret Brennan, thank you very much. And, of course, there'll be a lot of negotiating between now and May if this should happen. Right. So I think that we can sort of take a wait-and-see approach, though admittedly the announcement seemed befuddled, bizarre, unplanned.
Right. Also to have, you know, foreign leaders announcing major foreign policy initiatives at the White House without any U.S. official standing even at the microphone.
It was definitely odd,
sure.
Right? And I submit that this will be an odd journey moving forward.
Right.
But I don't think we should sort of dismiss the president and his team completely out of hand. I think they recognize how serious this is.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, too, is the president has a wealth of people in this country, both Democrats and Republicans, who might see this as an opportunity to get back to the table and really hammer out some kind of consensus and bring real change to the peninsula. I could see guys like, I could see the president reaching out to Bill Richardson, for example, and saying, hey, why don't you be part of this team that's going to try to hammer something out? So the fact that the president is upending things, that's what he got sent to Washington to do. And maybe upending it further, he'll bring on some people to help him, negotiate with
what
these guys.
we do know, and something that all sides agree on, is that there is no good military option with North Korea.
Right.
So something very different needs to be done, and maybe this is it.
Defense Secretary
right?
Mattis did say that war on the peninsula would be the most horrific thing that this generation has ever experienced.
Right. So meanwhile.